With all the crushing predictability of the fate of a small chihuahua being sat on by a morbidly obese person, the very first book in the New Old World series turns out to be a current year product. A tragedy for the Chihuahua, no doubt, but not too much of an eyebrow-raising surprise for the rest of us, as it includes, about half a dozen or so female knights, the majority of which are Pegasus knights, just to, hammer home the point good and proper, and with all of the additional female characters, like Ladies of the Lakes, etc., I do believe that there are more women characters in the Lords of the Lance book than there are female ones. Now, one might hint at this being then a somewhat misleading name, but at least Games Workshop knows, as well as the rest of the world, that blatantly putting your progressivism on the cover will scare off the customers, much like the recent supposedly historical video about Napoleon that focused more on Josephine than the titular main character. It's beginning to be a rather well-used marketing tactic these days, as if nothing else they are learning that, again, putting it on the title will decrease sales rather rapidly. So, let's talk a little bit about this. It has reached the eyes of a few early viewers, myself included. And the very first part of the book, the literal prologue, introduces us to our main character, a female knight, of course. Obviously, wearing full black steel plate armor and moving around effortlessly. In fact, she is also carrying an enormous pile of wood on her back as she does so. She is doing this because she's handing out wood to the poor peasants manning the walls, because the poor peasants are being kept in the cold, because their lord thinks that keeping them cold will keep them awake. Which actually, yes, kind of makes a certain amount of sense, but this is then swiftly followed by the daughter lecturing the lord about how to, run his castle. So far, so Marvel. And as if to finish this off, the woman then engages in mortal combat with a horde of undead skeleton monsters. She overcomes her fear of seeing the living dead for the first time in about 0.5 picoseconds, and then continues to slaughter all of them whilst dragging a helpless old man behind her, eventually even picking him off the ground and carrying him with her to save him. After having dispatched all of the evil undead entities and burned their boat, it turns out that the boat was supposed to be carrying her brother, her useless sack-of-shit brother, who has apparently been captured by the Tomb Kings. As her brother is now a damsel in distress, she vows to go and save him. Yes. This is indeed a Marvel movie, and it deviates not one iota from that script. And the thing is, it's not even that the peasant girl becoming a knight is necessarily a bad story. Joan of Arc, of course, which has been copied in Warhammer, is just one such story, and it's a beloved one, but this is the 15th such story released this goddamn week. I mean, literally, it's the meme, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, what are you having today? I think I'll have a strong female character. Ooh, spicy. What else? Feudalism bad. Oh, daring today. Daring indeed. As the author, Graham McNeil, and this is how we knew this was pretty much inevitable, in an interview previous to the release of the book, stated that it would have characters that had some views on governance, thinking that feudalism might not be the best way, and asking some questions about who gets to be a knight. Wow, cutting edge shit there indeed. Critiques of feudalism. And a little bit of modern day gender politics, of course. Oof, Jesus. That's some spicy shit right there. Really. Rebellious in the extreme. But, okay, and this was the problem as well. The book, I was about to say the movie there, because I was thinking of Napoleon there for a second, it does the classical have its cake and eat it too, where a female character, for example, points out to the disabled character, by the way, Britonia has sign language now, and obviously there's disabled characters in the book, because again, it is indeed the current year, that it's damned hard to be better than everyone else, and still being barred your calling because of your gender or disability or whatever. Again, we are really pushing the limits of modern-day literature here. Really, seriously, like this is Disney Wars level of cutting edge right here. But here's the problem. If this is indeed so rare, if she had to buck the trend to become a knight, which, fair enough, that's an interesting story, but nobody ever reacts to her. Nobody reacts to her or the other half-dozen female knights. Nobody points it out and goes like, that's weird, that's very unusual. See, there's an excellent example of this. Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones, right? She's a big, strong, but insecure woman who really is stronger than a lot of the men and really is more brutally efficient at them than many of them at being a knight, right? But whenever somebody sees her, they're like, Jesus, what are you? Like, lady? And she's like, I'm not a lady. Because it would be extraordinarily unusual. But in this book, nobody raises so much an eyebrow at this, and yet she's still like, oh, it's very unusual. I meant so many hardships. Even as nobody comments on it. You get to have your current day of like, oh, it's so tough being a woman, and yet also being 100% accepted by everyone around you, including even knights errants, who happily take the piss of other full knights, like another character, Knights of the Quill, but doesn't dare do it to her. Hey. Also interestingly, it is suggested that she was allowed to take the Knight's Oath directly. So, okay, this is another little bit of a problem here. So, normally, a Knight of Bretonnia needs to go through a period of being a Knight Errant, a squire, or a knight in learning, essentially. He needs to commit some sort of action, some sort of deed, some sort of a great labor to be noticed by the rest of nobility, and then he is elevated to the rank of full knight. This is why the Knight's Vow, including a promise to keep safe the lands that he is given upon becoming a knight. And yet apparently she was allowed to skip all of that and take the Knight's Vow directly. Oh yeah, it is harsh being a woman in Bretonnia, apparently. This darn patriarchal society, allowing the women to get away with things that the men need to do. And the worst part is also, the Joan of Arc character, which exists in Bretonnia lore, which I forget her name now, something or other. Even she wasn't given a knightly title for nothing. She had to commit her great deed first. And then she was recognized with a knighthood and a noble title, as this does happen in Bretonnia. There are even examples of peasants being briefly elevated to nobility and then usually dying in their first battle because they've got no idea what they're goddamn doing, of course. But the knightly vow itself is not barred on any gender lines. You just need to do something worthwhile to be given it, but apparently not in the case of the female knights. Interesting. Now, this could also simply be a case of, insufficient lore understanding, as there is also a mention of a crusade to Araby here too, mentioning a lake, which the name's forgetting about me now, but I remembered it from an Empire sourcebook way back in the day, so I looked it up real quick, and here's the thing, there has only been so many crusades to Araby, and I'll be honest, the current timeline of the new old world confuses me somewhat, but the knight explains it. He's like, oh hey, you know about that great crusade? That's amazing. Could you tell me more? And he's like, no, you don't want to hear about it. It was a war without honor that broke the best of us, and no, it isn't. No, it wasn't, more correctly. The Great Crusade to Araby was a defensive crusade to push the forces of Jafar, the evil sultan of all of Araby, back out of Astalia. Or was it Talia? Astalia, I think. It was a defensive crusade. They did sack one more or less innocent port city, and, echo of our own crusade, but even that was a trap laid for them by Jafar, who wanted them to quench their thirst for vengeance upon this city and then leave him alone to reinvade again. But the knights didn't do that because they weren't motivated by vengeance, but by honor. The Crusaders only left after killing Jafar and determining that honor had been satisfied, and then the overwhelming majority of them simply left again. This was absolutely a crusade with honor. And either they're talking about a new crusade that they've invented in the meantime, I suppose, which is possible, or the author is simply going like, well, the crusades in our time, they were bad, right? They were very bad, and so this must be bad. No, the crusades in our time also were entirely justified, mind you. The early ones at least. Some of the later against European heretics, you could argue about those. But the early crusades against the Muslim world, absolutely justified. In fact, we gave up attacking them long before they gave up attacking us. They were defensive actions, and there is no quarrel to be had about it. Aye, but we're wandering somewhat off the topic here, aren't we? I'll admit too, I only got about a third through the book, because it did not hook me in at all. And to be entirely fair, that might very well be because the opening segment was literally a Marvel movie script, and I'm like, oh god, I already watched She-Hulk. I don't need to read it. Or the equivalents, like, no, this is fine. And I skimmed through it to find some of the other dumbass stuff as well, but it could not keep my attention. And at the end of the day, you can absolutely make stories that are interesting in this vein, but again, you need to make the Brienne of Tarth story, okay? Brienne of Tarth is one of my favorite characters from Game of Thrones, specifically because she is unusual, and her only, the only person who recognizes for her skill is actually Jaime, who is on his own enormous journey from a cocksure young lad after being humiliated, and then bonding to Brienne of Tarth, who is the exact opposite of everything he has ever valued before, and considering her a friend, possibly even beginning to fall a bit for her, just like she absolutely is for him. That's the story. Marvel character beating the shit out of an army of undead after never seeing them before, saving an old man in the process, and then going, I must save my retarded brother from their clutches. That's a story I've seen a little bit too often, frankly. Not to mention as well, it's like the entire idea of it, like, oh, well, we're gonna have to critique feudalism a little bit more. You know, this is a far more progressive age in Bretonia, apparently. Why? It's Bretonia. Well, not to mention, okay, if we're gonna be progressive about this, let's turn this around on the female Space Marine argument again, shall we? When do we see Misters of the Lake? Because, of course, only women are allowed to wield magic in Bretonia. Now, there's even a mention of an astromancer in the series too, which is like, okay, so the Lord employs an astromancer. Now, astromancy was even then recognized as a form of magic, but that was apparently allowed. Okay, a bit of a weird lord there, but as a lord, he could probably get away with it. But we still haven't got ladies of the lake. I say we need misters of the lake, god damn it. If everything needs to be equal, then let's make everything equal. Let's make it all retarded, okay? Because I've already heard the argument like, why are you complaining about the full armored wearing woman riding a horse with wings? It's obviously fantasy. It is. And hey, if nothing matters, which is of course a retarded argument, let's go the full 10 yards, Games Workshop. Misters of the Lake, turn your product fully into the joke you are already making it. I mean, goddammit, why stop here? If we're gonna make it a comedy product, might as well take it all the way, eh? But of course not, because I've been hesitating to beat this drum again, but we all know why they're doing this. There's no question there, so I'm not even going to bother repeating it. We've literally done a video just last week when they stated the goal outright. It has nothing to do with Warhammer, it has nothing to do with lore, it has nothing to do with telling a story, it has to do with the ideological persuasions of the people writing and the people in charge. Simple as. So, there you go. The immediate start to the new Old World is exactly as everyone with a brain betwixt their ears would have predicted. I suppose I'll take some solace in being right, as always. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.